DJI just removed the geofencing feature on all of their drones in the United States. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob. I'm the drone coach. If you don't follow me on Instagram, that's typically where I post a ton of my content. I'm going to be posting a little bit more on my YouTube this year, but definitely go and follow me on that. Getting into DJI and why this is so intense, there's, a lot of back and forth, like, is this amazing? Is this not? And I kind of want to just break down, obviously, just objectively what I think is happening and, my thoughts as a drone operator running a drone business in the United States, how it affects me and how it's going to affect the industry. January 13th, this officially started, and they kind of announced it randomly that if you do your software update on the drones, you're no longer going to have geofencing. And so I took out my drone, updated it, went to go fly it, prepped for a flight in a restricted airspace area, no fly zone. Typically, what I would do is I would get my certificate of authorization from the FAA, or I would get a Lance approval, and then I would have to prove to DJI through their unlock GEO Zone feature online and tell them when I'm flying, where I'm flying, how high I'm flying, and all that kind of stuff. Then I would give them the actual documentation to show that I was approved to fly there. Then they would review it and send me what they call an unlock license. And then I would be able to actually load that onto the drone and basically pull up a section, whether it was a polygon or a circle, where I was actually flying. And so that way I could be kind of geofenced into that area. Well, when I went to do it on January 14th, I put in the unlock license request, and DJI sent me back this email that said, "This did not pass. You are no longer required to do this in your country because of the airspace now. We don't need an unlock license for you," which is really freaky. Because, obviously that's what we've been doing, since 2013. DJI has had these geofencing features on all DJI drones. Some people hate them, some people love them. I've had challenges with them at times where I'm trying to unlock an area, or I'm on site and I didn't know I needed an unlock license and I'm trying to fly. Do have approval to fly there, but the drone won't let me fly. So a lot of people that have Autel drones, other types of drone manufacturers, they're going, well, yeah, welcome to the club. Like, we haven't had to deal with that. So this is actually what it looks like to be a real drone operator. Okay, whatever. It's just now DJI who has 75% of the marketplace, and most drones out there, consumer and professional, are DJI. Like, this is a big deal. So, like I said, I went to go and do the unlock license and it said I didn't have to. That's pretty freaky. So then I got on site, went to take off, and it did say, hey, you're in enhanced warning zone, because I was like right next to the airport. Got approval through the FAA, got a certificate of authorization, and was able to, obviously prove that I had approval there. But DJI was like, we don't really care, but you are in enhanced warning zone, so keep that in mind. I did put in my phone number, and then they sent me a code, but then I was good to fly. I was good to take off. And that's just really scary. Thinking, like, from my perspective, I know all the steps that it takes to go into getting FAA approval, making sure I know the airspace, like knowing what the restrictions are before I take off. There are so many people out there that have no idea what they're doing. They buy a DJI drone at Best Buy. They're super stoked on it. They go out and fly. Oh no, I'm close to an airport. I didn't even know that. There are planes like flying overhead, especially here, like in Las Vegas. It's a very, very restricted, super congested airspace with, just planes, but also tons of helicopter traffic. And so just to think that someone can go down on the strip, pull the drone out. And I've actually had instances where I am operating legally, flying in a no-fly zone. I have my certificate of authorization, or I have my Lance approval request, and I'm about to take off. And I've seen actual other drone pilots with their drones out trying to capture the same thing, trying to take off. And I ended up talking to one of them. Was like, hey, what are you doing? Like, are you going to be operating here? I want to make sure we're safe. I'm about to take off. And he was like, well, no, my drone won't let me take off here. Like, I don't know why. I'm like, well, you're downtown like Las Vegas, like it's a total no-fly zone. You can't fly here. Obviously, it's a red zone. And he's like, oh man, I didn't know that. Like, can you just give me your approval? I'm like, yeah, no, not gonna do that. And that kept him legally safe, right? And so what I see happening in the future, moving forward, now that this has like happened, a lot of different things. But like why this is a big deal is because there's people that are educated on what they can and can't do legally, what airspace they can fly in, can't fly in. Then there are other people who can buy the same drones, can buy the same tech, who have no idea. And those people, yes, they're negligent because they don't know about it, but they're also going to be breaking FAA regulations, and that's just going to happen. And it scares me to think that there are people like that guy who are going to be starting to take off regularly in areas that were GEO zones and required authorization, required you to prove to DJI, that now can just take off and fly whenever they want. Now that's scary. So going back to the FAA, like obviously, like when I look at the safety side, and I also look at like the ease of access side, a lot of people with DJI have been frustrated because they're like, hey, I bought this drone, I should be able to operate it how I want. Okay, so for those people, it's obviously going to make things easier. So for someone like me who has already gotten my airspace authorizations and all that stuff, great. Now I can just avoid one more step of proving to DJI and unlocking it when I'm going out and flying. But then on the other side, when it comes to safety, I think that's where we are in for some challenging waters ahead, because like even just now, like we've got the LA, areas on fire, and there are a ton of incidents with illegal drone activity. There's actually even a collision with a drone and a Beechcraft airplane or whatever, and they had to be grounded for a weekend to get the wing fixed because it was broken, because the drone crashed into it. So that's an area where what they have is a temporary flight restriction. And so those are harder to find, obviously. I mean, if you pull up air control or, an airspace app, it will give you real-time data on that. But, it's a little bit harder to like figure out, like in Vegas, if I have president come through, and they'll come through a lot during campaign season, like they'll just boom, all of a sudden a TFR, and I don't really know, right? So I've got to be really cognizant of that and checking every time I go out and fly. Those are a little bit difficult to spot, but when it comes to actual just airports, those never change, right? It's like, okay, this is class C airspace, this is class D airspace, this is where we need approval to fly, this is how I, if I can get LANC approval or if I need to do a COA request. So those ones are just more consistent, and like both of these things are now really a challenge. So what I'm predicting happening moving forward, and let me just go back, like why did DJI do this, right? Two things. So number one, obviously remote ID has started like being more prevalent, required back, a year or two ago, where it's like, hey, all drones manufactured need to have remote ID. Or if you're flying an older school drone, you need to have a remote ID, compliant module, right? An aftermarket module. So the goal for remote ID is to be able to track down drone pilots quickly, to be able to find these operators and know, like, okay, if the drone's over here and the pilot's over here, like we should be able to still find them, right? So that helps with law enforcement. Is obviously huge can of worms to open up when it comes to that, safety wise, and like who can find all this information. Is it everyone? Is it just law enforcement? Not talking about that. But because we've got remote ID, it seems like DJI is on the side of saying like, well, because that's more the focus, like we don't need GEO zones anymore, because now we can enforce a lot easier when it comes to spotting drones with remote ID and seeing where they are being operated from. So they're basically saying like, hey, we've got this in place now, so enforcement should be easier. So that's like the one side. On the underlying side, like the US has made it very clear that they are anti-DJI for reasons that are true or false. I don't really know, and hopefully we will find out in the next few months, because I believe DJI is actually suing the United States government for just treating them unfairly. If it comes out that they're actually in cahoots with the Chinese government, then there'll be problems there, obviously. But hopefully it'll just be like a clean bill of health, and they'll be like, hey, we were treated unfairly, we shouldn't, we're trying to help as much as possible. And so really since 2013, with the implementation of the GEO Zones, DJI's goal has been to keep the skies safe in the United States and, anywhere in the world, right? More and more times the US keeps saying like, you are the enemy. And I feel like this could be a potential attack on the US, where it's like, hey, you put DJI in a corner and you start messing around with all the stuff, trying to put, them into the NDAA, like all this kind of stuff, they're going to fight back, right? And since they are the giant when it comes to drone operation, consumer and commercial, we're going to have to deal with that fallout. And so I feel like what happened was DJI was like, we're just lifting this because we have been partnered with the FAA. We have been partnered with the United States to ensure safety for the entire country when it comes to using our products and using them safely and really just maximizing the equipment. And when we just kept saying over and over and over, like, you are like against us, DJI was like, okay, well, if you think we're against you, like, find out what happens when we remove all the stuff that we put in place that have actually frustrated our consumers. It's like, you read it online like all the time, like, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to unlock this stupid drone. Like, why can't I just fly here? What's the deal? DJI has to take all that and go like, well, we're trying to ensure safety. They don't have to do that at all. It's just like Autel. They don't have that function. They're like, yeah, go right to the airport, take off. We don't really care. Do whatever, like, be legal, obviously. But I mean, if you broke the rules, like, we don't care. And DJI was very much on the side of like, hey, we're going to kind of police our own consumers in a way that facilitates safety, so that way people that don't know and aren't educated can't just throw their drone in the street, take off, close to an active taxiway. That's really like where they came from. And now removing that, I think it's very premature, because remote ID, like, although it's like prevalent now, like the enforcement when it comes to just every city across America is significantly like lacking. In Vegas, they're very on top of it. So when I'm flying in a restricted airspace, a lot of times cops will come. I've talked to Homeland Security, I've talked to Metro PD, I've talked to just Vegas PD, because they've seen that there's a drone blip on the radar or whatever, and they've come out and said, hey, you're flying here illegally. And then I just show them my paperwork, whether it's my COA or my Lance approvals, and say, well, technically I'm in a no-fly zone, but I've gotten approval to fly here based on the FAA or, the governing body of the airspace. So I'm good. And then they're like, okay, cool, you're approved, check, check, check. That's great that they're finding me, right, in Vegas. But other cities across America that don't have as much of a robust, like, operation when it comes to finding illegal drone operations, probably every other city in America is lacking in that. We're going to see some challenging times ahead. And so if you don't know how to get like proper airspace approvals, make sure to educate yourself. If you're flying, like, before I ever take off, I always check airspace. I don't care where I'm at, middle of the desert, right on the strip, it doesn't matter. I'm always checking airspace to make sure that I'm operating and flying legally. Whether I'm flying for fun, flying commercially, it doesn't really matter. So be sure to educate yourself, because like what we're going to see is just a rise in two things. We're going to see a rise in negligent illegal drone activity. People flying by airports going, hey, like, I thought I could fly here. What do you mean? Just like the guy a few years ago at the Super Bowl, he flew like the week of, and it's a temporary flight restriction for that whole week or whatever. And he flew during the TFR, and they went to arrest him, and he was like, I didn't even know, I'm just trying to fly for fun, like, I shouldn't be like charged with anything. And then he's facing like up to a year in jail, and I don't know if it's like a $50,000 fine or something. We're gonna see tons of those cases where people are like, I didn't know, right? And that's what's challenging. Like, we kind of had the really like just the bars up like in bowling, or we had the like training wheels on, and then DJI is just like, hey, we're gonna take them off, good luck. Like, you say we're not helping the US, like, now really find out like what it's gonna look like without our help and support. And then two, like, we're probably gonna see a lot more, unfortunately, mid-air collisions with drones and aircraft, where someone goes too high, is close to aircraft, and hit something, just like we saw in LA last week. And that's what really scares me, because if we start getting more and more of those, now that DJI is kind of like, hey, you do you, good luck, guys, there are going to be a lot more people that are just flying, going crazy, doing illegal stuff because they have no idea, they're not educated. And now we're creeping into that airspace that's part of the rest, where their actual aircraft operations and stuff. And that's what I'm scared of the most, because there probably will be a fallout. I just don't know what that looks like. Hopefully, it will mean that we have tighter restrictions, and maybe it's going to help the drone industry as a whole for, commercial Part 107 remote pilot certificate operators, people who are actually doing it right. That would be amazing. But there's also the chance that, we're on the other side and then they're just like, shut it down. One thing, like, I always go back to, though, is the FAA is in charge of keeping the skies safe in the US and facilitating air commerce. So if like 737 started falling out of the sky, they probably wouldn't ground them completely, because a lot of those, like, just like Southwest, like, they would just go belly up, right? So they can't really necessarily just make regulations that are going to ruin the industry. So they want to facilitate commerce, but also it's a double-edged sword of, we want to make sure it's safe, right? And unfortunately, what I learned, back in flight school, a lot of the regulations came from what they call tombstone technology, which is when somebody dies, you make a regulation. When someone crashes, you make a rule. And we're probably going to see more of that coming in the next few months as we get more potential collisions, we get more incidents and all that kind of stuff, which is scary to think. So definitely make sure to educate yourself. Be safe when you're flying. Like, know what airspace restrictions like you're dealing with, because you are always liable, right? But DJI was just helping you, saying, hey, if you don't know, if you're negligent, you just can't take off. Cool. Like, okay, cool. At least I can't go to like the Vegas airport and just like try to take my drone off. Now you potentially can, right? So make sure to educate yourself, make sure to be safe, because we got the training wheels off. It's up to us to keep the skies safe now. And DJI is kind of like, good luck. Wish you the best. So as always, fly safe out there, educate yourself, and hopefully in 2025, it's time to crush the drone business. Hopefully you're starting to make some strides if you do fly commercially. And if you're interested in taking your drone business to the next level this year, hit me up. I'd love to book a time to chat with you, with my team or myself, where we can chat a little bit more about my program, what I teach pilots to do, what I've done over the last 7+ years in my drone business, and what I coach in my coaching program with our community of amazing drone pilots across the country. So if that's something you want to do, click on the link below, and you can book a time with my team, chat about taking your drone business to the next level and making money flying drones. So as always, follow me on Facebook, Instagram at The Drone Coach, and we'll see you next time.